when you're dealing with creative music and you're trying to basically like acquire or semi-master a language so that you can communicate, especially as an improviser, there's definitely a process involved where you have to do this long sort of intake. Like if I was learning German or whatever, like there has to be a process where I can get to a place where I can communicate. And that process involves a lot of study, like a lot of research. I got to learn the language, I got to learn how to express myself, etc. So just on that side of things, research is definitely needed. And I mean, not everyone would describe it as research. It's basically that's what it is. You investigate a topic and you investigate it enough so you can use it to communicate to kind of put it into your own perspective. If you're an improviser and you're trying to learn how to play like Charlie Parker, you have to listen to tone, you have to transcribe, you have to internalize that information, etc. And that applies to everything. If I'm trying to study and get to a point where I can communicate my music through the prism of Puerto Rican music, just to give you an example, then there's going to be a lot of research involved. There's going to be a lot of like gathering information and getting to a point where I can kind of feel comfortable with the elements. So that, to be honest, that's kind of my favorite part of the process. My favorite part is the research, just gathering the information even before creating anything, investigating, just trying to find what you find attractive and what you can get from things, and seeing how you can kind of spin it into your own personal way. That's probably the thing that I enjoyed the most.
Something that's really interesting about loving that part of it, what strikes me is that it also keeps you being a listener and maybe even a fan. Like it keeps you in that active listening mode as opposed to maybe being disconnected from the music, being too intellectual.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it definitely keeps that in there. And I mean, you mentioned this thing about being a fan, and especially with music, when you listen to music for a very long time, it gets harder and harder to be kind of surprised. It gets harder to be impressed because you've heard a lot of things. So it's one of my favorite things in life is when that happens. When there are things where I'm like, wow, that I'm like, it brings me back to me being like 10, 11 years old and hearing something for the first time, or 14 or 15, and being like blown away. This got me. So it's still refreshing to me to still find that or even be on the search for it. Because I think a lot of it is like you mentioned, like this idea of like really like still trying to listen for that, like searching for that feeling, searching for that, that, okay, I want to connect with the music in that sort of like deeper way.